My name is Dr. Evelyn Grant, and I've spent most of my life working with older adults, helping them navigate the challenges that come with aging. As a geriatric specialist, I've witnessed firsthand how the process of growing older can sometimes lead to unexpected habits and habits that, though seemingly harmless, can slowly erode relationships and diminish a sense of connection with others. Today, I want to share some of the most common mistakes I've seen throughout my career and how these habits can unknowingly impact the lives of seniors. Let me introduce you to Mr. Richard Parker, a 76-year-old man who has dedicated his life to working with people in need. Richard is well respected in the community and has always been the life of any gathering. However, as he entered his later years, he began to notice that something had changed. His friends, once eager to spend time with him, seemed to drift away. His children, who had once called regularly, now only visited sporadically. Even his neighbors, whom he had known for decades, now avoided eye contact when they passed by. What happened to Richard? The simple truth is that, over time, he unknowingly developed a series of habits that slowly distanced him from those around him. He started neglecting his personal grooming, skipping haircuts, and showering less frequently, thinking that it didn't matter as much anymore. He began focusing only on his health issues, constantly bringing up his ailments during conversations, even though those around him wanted to talk about other topics. His home, once neat and organized, began to fill up with old items he couldn't bear to part with, creating a cluttered and overwhelming space. And perhaps most damaging of all, his once gentle demeanor started to fade. He became more blunt, offering unsolicited criticism, unaware of how hurtful his words were. Richard's story is not unique. Many seniors face similar challenges, and it's important to recognize that these small habits, if left unchecked, can have a profound effect on how we relate to others and feel connected to the world around us. But the good news is, it's never too late to make changes. With a little effort and self-awareness, it's possible to rekindle relationships and feel more engaged with life. As I sit here in my cozy office, sipping on my afternoon tea, I can't help but reflect on the many years I've spent working with older adults. The journey of aging is often filled with wisdom, but it's also marked by some unexpected twists and turns that, unfortunately, aren't always discussed openly. It's easy to assume that we'll always be the same, but the truth is that as we age, we sometimes pick up small habits that we don't even realize are damaging. These habits can slowly build a wall between us and the people we love, making us feel disconnected and, ultimately, isolated. Richard Parker's story is a perfect example of this. His children, who once adored visiting him, now seemed distant. His friends, who used to stop by for long conversations, began to make excuses. The man who once thrived on social connection found himself struggling to understand why he was being left behind. As I spoke with him, I realized something profound. It wasn't that he had changed who he was as a person, but rather, it was the small, unnoticed habits that had crept in over time that had subtly shifted how people saw him. I explained to Richard the habits we develop over the years, whether it's neglecting our grooming, focusing too much on health issues, or holding on to things that no longer serve us, can have a profound impact on our relationships. And sometimes we don't even realize it until it's too late. When I pointed out these small, seemingly insignificant changes, Richard was taken aback. "I never thought of it that way," he said, his voice full of surprise. "I guess I've been focusing so much on my health and my past that I didn't notice how it was affecting my connections with others." What Richard didn't realize was that these habits, though small on their own, had built up to create a distance between him and the world around him. His children, for example, didn't know how to connect with him beyond his health complaints. His friends, once eager to chat about shared memories, felt like the conversation always steered toward his ailments, which became draining for them. And his inability to part with old, sentimental items had made his home less inviting and more overwhelming for anyone who visited. I could see the regret in his eyes, but I also saw something else hope. Because the truth is, the same small changes that had caused this disconnect could be reversed with a little effort and mindfulness. Richard wasn't alone in this. Many of us, as we grow older, develop these habits without realizing the toll they take on our relationships and sense of self-worth. But once we acknowledge them, we can make the necessary adjustments to reconnect, feel more engaged, and embrace the world around us once again. It's never too late, I told him. And I believe that with small, consistent efforts, we can all regain the joy and fulfillment that comes from meaningful connections, just like Richard is learning to do. As Richard and I sat together, discussing the changes he could make, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of warmth in my heart. There's something so rewarding about helping someone rediscover joy and connection, especially when they've felt so distant for so long. Richard's story isn't unique, but it's a powerful reminder of how small shifts in our behavior and mindset can bring about profound changes, not just for us, but for the people we care about. It was clear that Richard needed to reawaken his playful side, the side of him that had once been so full of life and laughter. I looked at Richard and said, "You know, Richard, one of the most powerful ways to reconnect with the world around us is by rediscovering our sense of humor. You've always had that spark your laughter, the way you joke around with your friends. It's time to let that come back. When was the last time you really laughed with someone without worrying about health or the past?" He smiled faintly, but I could tell he was thinking about it. "It's been a while," he admitted, his voice tinged with a hint of sadness. "Exactly," I said gently. "Sometimes, when we focus too much on the serious things, we forget how important it is to have fun, to play, to simply enjoy the little things in life. Laughter doesn't just brighten your day. It brightens the lives of those around you, too." Richard nodded, and I could see that he was beginning to understand. "I think I used to joke around more," he said thoughtfully. "But lately, it feels like everything's so serious. Maybe it's because I've been so focused on what's wrong instead of what's right. That's when I knew we were on the right track. It's natural to focus on health and the changes that come with aging," I explained. "But if you let that dominate everything, it can make you seem less approachable, less connected to the joy of life. You don't need to change who you are, Richard. Just remember that laughter, playfulness, and lightheartedness are part of what makes us human. They keep us connected, not just with others, but with ourselves." Richard's eyes brightened as I spoke. He was beginning to see that rediscovering joy didn't require huge changes, just a willingness to embrace life's simple pleasures again. I encouraged him to start small, invite a friend over for a card game, share a funny story from his past with his kids, or even start watching some comedy shows he used to enjoy. These simple moments, these little bursts of fun and laughter, would gradually begin to restore the sense of connection he was missing. Over the following weeks, I watched as Richard's transformation unfolded. He started making small adjustments in his daily life, focusing less on his health struggles and more on finding moments of joy. He'd make little jokes with his neighbors, laughing at the small absurdities of life. His children noticed the change too. His conversations became more engaging, and his presence, once heavy with concern, was now lighter and more inviting. It was as if the world around him had shifted just by him letting go of some of the seriousness and allowing his playful side to shine through. The relationships he had once felt distanced from began to bloom again. Richard found himself surrounded by laughter and love, not because his circumstances had changed, but because his outlook had. This is the magic of rediscovering joy in the simplest of ways. It doesn't take grand gestures or dramatic transformations. Sometimes, all it takes is a shift in perspective, a decision to embrace the lightheartedness we all need, regardless of age. And as Richard learned, these small changes can bring back the warmth, the connection, and the love we all deserve to feel. As I left Richard's house that day, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Helping people like him isn't just my job, it's my passion. Seeing seniors rediscover their laughter, their sense of play, and their connection to the world around them is one of the most fulfilling parts of my work. If we can all just remember the power of laughter, of finding joy in the moment, I believe we can age gracefully and continue to build meaningful relationships, no matter how old we get. As Richard and I continued to talk, I could see the emotions start to surface. He had been so focused on the changes in his daily habits that he hadn't fully realized how deeply these habits were affecting his connections with the people he loved most. His sense of loneliness, the sense of being forgotten or left behind, was a reality that many seniors face, though they rarely talk about it. It's something that creeps up quietly, unnoticed at first, and then, suddenly, it's there, heavy in the heart. I've been feeling it for a while now, Richard confessed, his voice a bit more strained. It's not just that my kids don't visit as often, or that my neighbors are no longer stopping by to chat. It's this emptiness. I feel like I'm just fading into the background of my own life. As he spoke, I could hear the sadness in his words. It was a familiar sentiment, one I'd heard from many seniors throughout my years of practice. Aging can often bring with it a sense of isolation, a quiet, creeping sense that the world around you is moving on without you. And as much as we try to deny it, there's a certain grief that comes with it. Richard, like many others, had become so wrapped up in his own struggles, his health, his routines, and his nostalgia for the past that he hadn't realized how disconnected he had become from the people who once made him feel alive. It's not just the physical changes that we struggle with as we age, it's the emotional toll. Losing touch with family and friends, or feeling like you're no longer a part of the world around you, can be just as painful as any physical ailment. For Richard, his health had become a constant topic of conversation. His children, who once loved visiting, now seemed to avoid the visits because they didn't know how to connect with him beyond his health struggles. His conversations had become centered on his aches and pains, his doctor visits, and his past experiences. And while these things were important to him, they had unintentionally alienated him from his loved ones. "I've always been the one to take care of everyone," Richard said, his voice tinged with regret. "Now it feels like I'm the one who needs taking care of. And I hate it. I hate feeling like I'm a burden." I could see how much this weighed on him. Richard wasn't alone in feeling this way. Many seniors struggle with the shift from being the caretaker to becoming the one in need of care. It's a difficult adjustment, one that can bring feelings of inadequacy, loneliness, and frustration. The emotional cost of aging isn't always talked about, but it's something that many older adults experience quietly. What made Richard's situation even harder was that his desire to remain independent and self-sufficient was at odds with the reality of his aging body and mind. As he became more isolated, he started feeling less like the person he used to be, vibrant, full of energy, and always surrounded by family and friends. Now, he felt like a shadow of that man, watching the world pass by, with no way to catch up. This feeling of isolation, of fading into the background, is heartbreaking. It's a feeling that many seniors face, especially when they feel disconnected from those they love the most. And for Richard, it wasn't just about the loss of connections, it was about the slow loss of his own sense of self. As we sat there in silence for a moment, I couldn't help but feel a deep empathy for him. It's a painful truth that many of us will face as we age, but I also knew that, despite how heavy these feelings were, there was still hope. Change, though difficult, was possible, and it was never too late to reclaim the connections that matter most. I placed a hand on Richard's shoulder and said softly, "I know this is hard, Richard, but you're not alone. Many people feel the same way you do, and I'm here to help you take the first steps toward reconnecting, to rediscover your sense of joy, your sense of purpose, and the people who care about you." Richard nodded, a flicker of hope in his eyes. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but with each small change, he could begin to rebuild the connections that had been lost, to regain the feeling of being truly seen and loved. And that, I knew, would make all the difference. As I watched Richard sit back and reflect on our conversation, I could see a sense of realization dawning in his eyes. There was a moment of quiet, a pause, where he was processing everything that had been shared. Slowly, he leaned forward, his hands folded on the table, and looked at me with a renewed sense of determination. "I never thought about it like that," he said softly. "All this time, I thought I was just being honest and sticking to what I knew. But now I see that some of my habits, like constantly talking about my health or holding on to things I don't need, are actually pushing people away. I've been so focused on myself and my past that I forgot how important it is to connect with others in a way that makes them feel valued too." It was in that moment that I realized just how much of an impact small changes can have, not just on a single individual, but on the relationships and the world around them. Richard's willingness to acknowledge his habits and open his heart to the idea of change was the first step towards something much more beautiful: reconnection. "Richard," the first said with a smile, "this is a powerful realization, and you're not alone in this. Many of us, as we age, fall into the trap of holding on to old routines, old ways of thinking, and old habits without even realizing that they're keeping us from truly engaging with the world and the people around us. The good news is, it's never too late to make a change. By simply being open to shifting your approach, you can unlock a whole new world of joy and connection." Richard nodded slowly, absorbing my words. "But how do I start? Where do I even begin?" he asked. "It starts with small steps," I replied. "It's about finding those little habits that may have been creeping in over time. Things like neglecting your grooming, fixating on health problems, or becoming so set in your ways that you resist change. By being aware of them, you can choose to make a shift. Start by making an effort to engage more meaningfully with others. Share lighter stories, express interest in what they're doing, and don't let health problems dominate the conversation. Even something as simple as joining in on a family activity or trying a new hobby can help open doors to new connections." I could see that Richard was already thinking about his next steps. "I guess I've just been so caught up in the past, in what was," he said thoughtfully. "But I can see now that by embracing the present, by letting go of some old habits and exploring new ones, I can connect with people in a deeper way. Maybe I can start by reaching out to my neighbors more, or even picking up a new hobby to share with my kids." "That's exactly it, Richard," the first encouraged him. "By making small changes, you're not just transforming your own life, you're transforming your relationships. You're showing your loved ones that you're still growing, still interested in the world around you, and that you want to be a part of their lives." You're also opening the door for them to reconnect with you in ways that feel fresh and exciting. As Richard left that day, I could sense the shift in him. He wasn't just feeling better about the future, he was taking action. His willingness to reflect on his past habits and make changes that would bring him closer to those he loved was a powerful reminder that we all have the ability to grow, no matter our age. Richard's story serves as a hopeful message for anyone who feels disconnected, lonely, or uncertain about the future. It's a reminder that we don't have to settle into old, stagnant routines. By being open to change, we can bring joy and meaning back into our lives, rekindle old relationships, and build new ones. These small shifts are within all of us, whether we're in our 20s or our 80s, and they can make all the difference. For anyone reading this, I hope it encourages you to reflect on your own habits, to think about how you're engaging with those around you, and to take those first small steps toward creating a more connected, joyful life. It's never too late to change, and the relationships you care about can flow. The story of Richard Parker teaches us an important lesson. It's never too late to make small changes that can bring back joy and strengthen our connections with others. As we age, it's easy to fall into routines that isolate us or focus too much on health issues. However, by recognizing these habits and making simple adjustments, whether it's engaging in more playful conversations, reaching out to loved ones, or embracing new activities, we can create more meaningful relationships and a sense of belonging. Change doesn't have to be big or overwhelming. It's the little steps that can make all the difference in our lives. By staying open to change, we can bring vitality, happiness, and connection back into our world, no matter our age. If Richard's story resonated with you, I encourage you to think about the small changes you can make today to improve your connections and embrace a more joyful, fulfilling life. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Senior Moments Matt for more inspiring stories and helpful tips. Share your thoughts about Richard's story in the comments, and feel free to leave any questions or share your personal experiences. How have you made small changes in your life that helped you feel more connected? I'd love to hear from you.